At June 14th, 2025, 9:23 a.m. South China Sea, the USS Princeton Spy-1D radar, capable of tracking a baseball from 165 miles away, suddenly lit up with a contact accelerating hard toward the American cruiser. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer, previously sitting idle 108 nautical miles out, had just gone from cruising speed to flank speed in under 90 seconds. 30 knots, closing fast. Beijing's order was simple: intercept the American warship and force it to turn back. But what happened next would become a masterclass in why challenging the US Navy in open waters is a very expensive mistake. Could this near miss have triggered a real shooting war? And what does it reveal about China's fundamental limitations when facing American naval power where it matters most? The answer lies in what the Chinese didn't see coming. At 9:23 a.m., the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was conducting routine freedom of navigation operations, FUNOP for short, 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory, international waters, completely legal. These waters carry $3.4 trillion in global trade annually, and the US Navy has kept them open for decades so Chinese factories can keep shipping electronics to American stores. The USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class Aegis cruiser commissioned in 1989, was running standard patrol protocols. 122 vertical launch system cells loaded with SM-6 interceptors, each with a 240 nautical mile range in surface attack mode, SM-2 missiles for closer threats, Harpoon anti-ship missiles as backup. According to the Naval Sea Systems Command, the ship's Spy-1D phased array radar can detect and track over 100 targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 165 miles. Think about that. More than 100 targets. Addons. The Type 052D destroyer, designated by US intelligence as a Luoyang 3 class guided missile destroyer, was China's answer to American Aegis technology. Built between 2012 and 2021, it carries 64 VLS cells, YJ-18 anti-ship missiles with an estimated range of 290 nautical miles, and a Type 346A active phased array radar. On paper, respectable, but paper doesn't account for what happens when theory meets the US Navy. At 9:26 a.m., the Princeton's tactical action officer finished classifying the contact. Confirmed Type 052D destroyer, threat level moderate to high. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors tracked the Chinese ship with professional calm. That calm came from knowing their ship could delete any surface combatant in the People's Liberation Army Navy within minutes. The destroyer was accelerating hard, burning fuel at maximum rate, closing the distance at 30 knots. At current speed, weapons range in 17 minutes. The captain's response? Let's see how badly they want to embarrass themselves first, because reaching firing position would require the Chinese destroyer to navigate through 46 commercial vessels cluttering the shipping lanes within 50 miles, a Singapore-flagged container ship loaded with semiconductors, a South Korean LNG tanker worth $200 million, Japanese bulk carriers, Malaysian oil tankers, all depending on the US Navy to keep these routes safe and open. If Beijing wanted to turn international waters into Chinese territorial seas, they'd have to get past the force that's dominated blue water operations since 1945. At 9:30 a.m., the Princeton's Cooperative Engagement Capability, or CEC, instantly shared threat data across the entire strike group through Link 16 tactical data link. Every ship in the formation now saw exactly what the Princeton saw. The Nimitz, 104,600 tons of American naval aviation carrying 90 aircraft, adjusted flight operations with precision. Destroyers USS Chung Hoon and USS Kidd moved into defensive positions around the carrier, creating overlapping engagement zones. Any Chinese attack would have to penetrate multiple layers of Aegis defense. Good luck with that. Then at 9:35 a.m., the situation escalated from concerning to genuinely dangerous. An E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, orbiting at 25,000 feet and monitoring everything within a 400-mile radius, detected multiple aircraft launching from the Chinese carrier Shandong, positioned about 220 nautical miles northwest. Radar signature, J-15 fighters. 4 contacts climbing rapidly. The American air controllers noticed something almost amusing. The J-15S were struggling to gain altitude efficiently, likely because they'd launched via ski jump with restricted fuel loads and reduced weapons payload. loads. China's carrier aviation, limited by 1970s Soviet launch technology, simply couldn't match the sustained combat power of American catapult-launched Super Hornets. 1 minute later, sonar operators aboard the Princeton detected acoustic signatures consistent with a diesel-electric submarine Type 039 SSK 80 nautical miles southwest. According to analysis from Jane's Fighting Ships, the Type 039 has significantly higher acoustic signatures than modern nuclear-attack submarines. The Princeton's AN SQQ-89 sonar suite had been tracking this contact for over an hour. It was making as much noise as a freight train. Any competent submarine crew would have been mortified. The tactical picture was now complete. Surface ships from the 1990s design era, carrier aircraft that couldn't carry full weapons loads, submarines broadcasting their position. China was attempting multi-domain intimidation with fundamentally limited platforms. Unfortunately for Beijing, they just challenged the wrong navy in the wrong ocean. At 9:37 a.m., the USS Nimitz's flight deck erupted in the kind of controlled chaos only American carriers truly master. FA-18E Super Hornets launched from steam catapults every 45 seconds, a flawless cycle that Chinese carriers, relying on inefficient ski jumps, could only dream of matching. Steam roared from the catapult tracks as US naval aviation did what it does best: project overwhelming power. The first division of Super Hornets climbed past 15,000 feet, their AN/APG-79 AESA radars already locking onto the incoming J-15S at maximum range. The technology gap was almost unfair. The APG-79's thousands of transmit-receive modules could track dozens of targets simultaneously, while the J-15's mechanically scanned radar swept back and forth like a lighthouse, advertising its position to everyone listening. According to Naval Air Systems Command documentation, the APG-79 provides simultaneous air-to-air and air-to-ground capability with low probability of intercept. The J-15S, meanwhile, were still struggling for altitude, burning fuel rapidly after their ski jump launches with reduced weapons loads. American fighters launched at full combat weight with maximum fuel and full weapons racks, but visible firepower was only part of the advantage. Every FA-18 was networked through Link 16 data exchange, sharing sensor data instantaneously. If one jet detected a target, all of them saw it simultaneously. The Chinese pilots had to rely on voice commands and their own onboard sensors, like trying to fight a coordinated team while blindfolded. The technology gap wasn't measured in years, it was measured in decades. Then the EA-18G Growlers joined without firing a single weapon. Electronic warfare pods, specifically the ALQ-99 tactical jamming system, began radiating at full power. According to Defense News Analysis, the ALQ-99 can disrupt enemy radar and communications over ranges exceeding 100 miles. Chinese radar screens filled with false targets by the hundreds. Real aircraft disappeared into walls of electronic noise. The Shandong's air defense picture now looked like someone had thrown paint across every display, every blip potentially hostile, none confirmed. The Princeton's defensive systems tracked every potential threat with machine-like precision. Its Spy-1D radar, capable of spotting objects the size of a baseball from over 165 miles, made the Chinese destroyer appear as large as a barn. Fire control solutions updated constantly. At 9:47 a.m., the Chinese destroyer crossed a line that would have triggered immediate retaliation from almost any other navy. Its Type 346 phased array radar stopped scanning mode and locked onto the USS Nimitz with fire control precision. In naval doctrine, this is one step short of launching missiles, the electromagnetic equivalent of pointing a loaded gun. Inside the Princeton's Combat Information Center, the reaction was immediate but controlled. Years of training and countless exercises kept the crew disciplined. The Chinese were counting on American restraint. What that they were about to learn was that restraint doesn't mean weakness. The Princeton's fire control systems remained on standby, but those 122 VLS cells carried enough firepower to send the Chinese destroyer to the bottom within seconds. SM-6 missiles with 240 nautical mile reach, SM-2 missiles in surface mode, all ready to turn the destroyer into an artificial reef. Every firing solution constantly updated. The Chinese ship was vulnerable from multiple angles with zero chance of survival if combat began. The fire control lock lasted exactly 30 seconds, long enough for China to claim they could have attacked, but not long enough to justify US self-defense rules of engagement. Staged aggression aimed at the wrong target. The Princeton's crew recorded everything: timestamps, signal characteristics, bearing data, intelligence that would prove invaluable in any future conflict. But even after the Chinese destroyer stopped its targeting lock, the encounter was far from over. war. In the air, one J-15 pilot decided to demonstrate either courage or recklessness. Breaking formation, he dove toward an FA-18 in what fighter pilots call a thump, a close, aggressive pass meant to intimidate. The American pilot, trained at Top Gun, where such maneuvers are routine breakfast exercises, simply rolled inverted and slid smoothly into the Chinese jet's 6 o'clock position. For 3 full seconds, he maintained a perfect firing solution. His helmet-mounted display showed the J-15's engines glowing bright in infrared. One trigger squeeze and an AIM-9X Sidewinder would have ended the engagement. He didn't squeeze. Professional discipline held firm. The moment passed, but the lesson was delivered. Meanwhile, their submarine made its final mistake. The Type 039 diesel-electric boat had been creeping closer, using thermal layers to mask its position. At 9:51 a.m., it raised its snorkel to recharge batteries. Towed array sonar immediately detected subsurface contact bearing 159 degrees, range 15,000 yards. Contact is snorkeling. Probable Type 039, making noise like a freight train. The submarine's captain either didn't know or didn't care that the Princeton's AN SQQ-89 integrated sonar suite had been tracking his acoustic signature for the past hour. His position was cataloged within meters. If this turned into combat, he'd have about 12 seconds to reconsider his career choices before an ASROC anti-submarine rocket sent his boat to crush depth. The tactical picture had become a textbook example of operational failure. Chinese forces had boxed themselves, carrier to the northwest, destroyer to the west, submarine to the southwest. If shooting started, none would last 5 minutes, and the Americans were about to demonstrate exactly why. At 2:30 p.m., the USS Nimitz launched the largest single-carrier show of force in years. 48 aircraft roared off the deck, Super Hornets armed with live AIM-120 AMRAAMs and AIM-9X Sidewinders, EA-18G Growlers carrying electronic warfare systems powerful enough to blind an entire air defense network, E-2D Hawkeyes providing 400-mile surveillance coverage and airborne command and control. The afternoon sky darkened under the swarm of American air power. The Growlers struck first, their ALQ-99 jamming pods running at maximum output, transforming Chinese radar displays into meaningless chaos. False targets flooded screens by the hundreds, while real aircraft vanished into electronic noise walls. The Shandong's air defense picture looked like someone had thrown paint across every monitor, every blip a possible threat, none confirmable. Then came the submarine, a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine that had been silently shadowing the Chinese formation for 8 consecutive days. Silent, invisible, waiting. At 3:47 p.m., she surfaced just 6 nautical miles from the Shandong, close enough for Chinese lookouts to see her conning tower with naked eyes. The psychological impact was devastating. After 8 days of undetected stalking, every layer of their anti-submarine warfare defense, helicopters, sonar buoys, hull-mounted sonar, had completely failed to detect a 900-ton American submarine. In a real war, their carrier would already be gone. The submarine's commanding officer ordered an emergency surface purely for psychological effect. She broke through the waves like a breaching whale, water cascading off her hull in the afternoon sunlight. Chinese crews had perfect visibility and ample time to photograph undeniable American dominance. After 90 seconds, long enough to be seen, photographed, and reported, she slipped quietly back beneath the surface. The message was unmistakable. The United States owns the undersea battlefield. In the skies, American fighters demonstrated air combat maneuvering superiority against increasingly desperate Chinese pilots. The J-15SC, already critically low on fuel after ski jump launches and steep climbs, couldn't match American turn performance. Every engagement ended identically. U.S. fighters in perfect firing positions, Chinese fighters defensive and burning their remaining fuel. One by one, Chinese jets broke off engagement, heading back to Shandong on nearly empty tanks. Their combat endurance had been exhausted in failed attempts to compete. Many landed with emergency fuel reserves. Some likely saw bingo fuel warnings in actual combat for the first time outside simulators. By 4:23 p.m., the Shandong Carrier Strike Group began withdrawing. Official Chinese statements claimed they had completed scheduled exercises. Everyone knew the truth. They had come to demonstrate Chinese naval power, to intimidate lawful navigation, and to assert control over waters that weren't theirs. Instead, they received a comprehensive lesson in why the South China Sea remains firmly under American sea control. Let's examine why this encounter went the way it did. The USS Princeton represents the evolution of Aegis combat systems over 3 decades. According to Naval Sea Systems Command specifications, her Spy-1D radar operates in S-band frequencies with 4 fixed arrays providing 360-degree coverage. Detection range 165 miles for fighter-sized targets. Tracking capacity over 100 simultaneous targets with engagement capability against 18 threats. Her 122 Mark 41 VLS cells can launch SM-6 missiles capable of hitting surface targets at 240 nautical miles or aerial threats at similar ranges. The SM-6 uses active radar homing and can receive mid-course updates via the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network. That means every Aegis ship in the strike group can guide missiles launched by any other ship. Think about that. Distributed lethality. By contrast, the Type 052D destroyer carries 64 VLS cells with a mix of HHQ-9B surface-to-air missiles and YJ-18 anti-ship missiles. The YJ-18, according to Jane's Defense Analysis, has an estimated range of 290 nautical miles, but relies on active radar terminal guidance that can be jammed by American electronic warfare systems. The Type 346A radar, while impressive for Chinese technology, still uses older processing architecture that limits simultaneous engagement capability compared to American Aegis Baseline 9 systems. In the air, the technology gap was even more pronounced. The FA-18E Super Hornet, powered by 2 F414 GE400 engines producing 22,000 pounds of thrust each, launches at maximum weight from steam catapults. According to Naval Air Systems Command data, a Super Hornet can carry over 17,000 pounds of external weapons and fuel while maintaining full performance envelope. The J-15, China's carrier-based fighter derived from Soviet Su-33 technology, launches via ski jump with significantly reduced fuel and weapons loads. Reports from the U.S. Office of Naval Intelligence indicate J-15 ski jump launches reduce weapons payload by approximately 40% compared to catapult launches. The AN APG-79 AESA radar in the Super Hornet uses thousands of individual transmit-receive modules, each acting as a miniature radar. This provides simultaneous air-to-air search, track-while scan, and synthetic aperture radar ground mapping with low probability of intercept. The J-15's mechanically scanned radar, by comparison, must physically rotate to scan different areas, limiting its ability to track multiple targets and making it far more detectable. But the real American advantage lay beneath the surface. The Virginia-class submarine, according to Naval Sea Systems Command specifications, operates at noise levels, making it virtually undetectable by conventional sonar. Her AN BQQ-10 sonar suite with spherical and towed arrays can detect diesel submarines at ranges exceeding 50 nautical miles. The Type 039 diesel-electric submarine, while quieter than earlier Chinese designs, still produces significantly higher acoustic signatures than American nuclear boats. When she raised her snorkel to recharge batteries, she broadcast her position to every American sonar operator within 80 miles. These aren't minor differences, they're generational gaps. Beyond the tactical details, this encounter revealed fundamental strategic realities about naval power in the Western Pacific. First, consider doctrine. The United States practices what military analysts call distributed maritime operations, multiple platforms sharing sensor data through networks like Link 16 and CEC, creating engagement zones that overlap and reinforce. According to the U.S. Naval Institute, this concept leverages information superiority to achieve decision advantage, seeing threats first, deciding faster, engaging with precision. China's approach relies more heavily on anti-access area denial, or A2/AD, using land-based missiles, aircraft, and submarines to create zones where American forces supposedly cannot operate. But A2/AD assumes static defense and Chinese forces operating near their coasts with land-based support. In the open ocean, 180 nautical miles from shore, those advantages evaporated. Second, alliance implications. The Nimitz Carrier Strike Group operates within a broader network of allied forces. Japan maintains helicopter destroyers being converted to F-35B carriers. Australia operates Hobart-class Aegis destroyers with compatible systems. South Korea fields Sejong-class destroyers with Aegis Baseline 7. These forces train together constantly in exercises like Rim of the Pacific, practicing the exact distributed operations demonstrated on June 14th. China, by contrast, has no comparable alliance structure, no integrated networks, no interoperable systems at this level. Third, the message to Beijing was unmistakable. Technological superiority and operational experience lie firmly with the United States Navy. Attempting to intimidate American forces in international waters will result in professional embarrassment at best. At worst, in a real conflict, it would result in catastrophic losses. The broader pattern here reflects decades of American investment in naval technology, training, and operational experience. Since 1945, the U.S. Navy has maintained continuous at-sea operations, rotating carrier strike groups through every ocean, accumulating expertise that cannot be replicated in simulators or coastal patrols. China's Navy, while growing rapidly in numbers, still lacks this depth of blue water operational experience. That said, this wasn't a complete victory without considerations. The U.S. Navy faces real challenges maintaining its technological edge. First, sustainability. Operating carrier strike groups costs billions annually. According to Congressional Budget Office analysis, maintaining 11 carrier strike groups requires approximately $26 billion in annual operating costs alone, not including procurement or modernization. Political will to sustain this investment remains uncertain as domestic priorities compete for funding. Second, technological vulnerability. American naval power depends heavily on satellite communications, GPS navigation, and data networks. According to Defense Department assessments, these systems could be vulnerable to jamming, cyber attacks, or anti-satellite weapons. If China develops effective counterspace capabilities, Link 16 networks and GPS-guided weapons could face degradation. Third, geographic reality. The South China Sea lies within range of Chinese land-based anti-ship ballistic missiles like the DF-21D and DF-26, with estimated ranges of 900 and 2,500 miles respectively. While these missiles have never been tested in combat and face significant targeting challenges, they represent a threat American surface ships must account for. Fourth, the submarine challenge. China is rapidly expanding its submarine force, commissioning new Type 093B nuclear attack submarines and Type 039C improved diesel boats. While currently inferior to American submarines, sheer numbers could complicate undersea warfare in a future conflict. Detecting and tracking dozens of submarines simultaneously, even noisy ones, strains resources. Fifth, escalation risks. Encounters like June 14th carry inherent dangers. A miscalculation, a radar lock held too long, an overly aggressive pilot. Any of these could trigger combat neither side intended. According to international relations scholars, the risk of accidental war increases with the frequency of close military encounters. The South China Sea sees such encounters regularly. Looking forward, several questions remain unanswered. Will China continue these aggressive intercepts despite consistent failure to intimidate American forces? Will Beijing invest in the technologies necessary to genuinely challenge U.S. naval dominance? Quieter submarines, better networking, true blue water operational experience? Or will they recognize that controlling the South China Sea requires defeating a navy that has dominated ocean warfare for 80 years, a task no adversary has accomplished since 1945? The real question isn't whether China can build more ships. They're already doing that. The question is whether they can build the integrated combat systems, develop the operational doctrine, and accumulate the at-sea experience to use those ships effectively against the world's most sophisticated naval force. So far, as June 14th demonstrated, the answer is no. On June 14th, 2025, in international waters of the South China Sea, China attempted to intimidate the United States Navy with a multi-domain show of force. They deployed surface ships, launched fighters, positioned submarines. They locked fire control radars on American vessels. They challenged the freedom of navigation that keeps $3.4 trillion in annual trade flowing through these waters. The result? A comprehensive demonstration that building ships is not the same as projecting naval power, that aggressive posturing is not the same as operational capability, and that challenging American forces in open waters remains, as it has for 8 decades, a losing proposition. The Princeton returned to station. The Nimitz continued operations. The Virginia-class submarine vanished back into the depths. And Beijing learned once again why the United States Navy rules the waves. What do you think about this confrontation? Could repeated encounters like this eventually spark a larger conflict? And does China's Navy have any realistic path to challenging American sea control in the Western Pacific? Share your analysis in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth military analysis. Thanks for watching.